So,
Yeah.
welcome one and all to this, the fourth of our Advent in Community sessions. It's a real joy to welcome you all to the screen from wherever you are in the world. This conversation this evening is part of a wider series of conversations that we've been hosting over these 4 weeks with leaders of intentional Christian communities across the globe, exploring what it means to live in community today and why the world needs intentional Christian communities, not just at Advent, but all year round. So, if you've just joined us or if you've just got to know about these sessions and you want to catch up on the other ones, they are all available now at iona.org.uk, where you can find recordings of the last three. But for this evening, it gives me great pleasure to welcome to your company Theresa Edlmann, Bob Faris, and John de Gruchy, leaders and members of the Volmoed Community near Cape Town in South Africa. And the map very helpfully locates that for us. We've recently been put back in touch again, the Iona and the Volmoed communities, through our mutual friend Bob Faris on the screen here with you. And two of our Iona community members, Colin Douglas and Mike Miniter, visited Volmoed earlier this year. So the connections are already alive for us between our two communities. But to get us going, I'm going to invite you to introduce yourselves, to share a little bit about your own connection with Volmoed. And it'd be great if you could also share a little bit about the origin story of the Volmoed community. Now, I know, John, you're going to give us the bulk of that, but just briefly to give us a sense of who else is on the screen. Bob, do you want to just introduce yourself to us, and then Theresa, and then we'll go over to John for the wider introduction. Bob.
Sure. Thanks very much, Ruth. I can do that. It's maybe a bit strange to have this Canadian person speaking about Volmoed in South Africa. Um, I've had some connection with Southern Africa for some time. I'm a Presbyterian minister from Canada. I lived and worked and was at a seminary in Mozambique, the Recatla Seminary, for 6 years in the late 80s and early 90s, and had connections with South Africa at that time, more so in the Johannesburg area, but I had visited Cape Town as well. And out of that experience, I when I was looking at doing a PhD, I landed on the theme of the Protestant churches in Mozambique and the liberation struggle. And I wanted to do that work in an African university if I could. And the one that came to mind and that most people recommended was University of Cape Town, and particularly to work with John de Gruchy, who you see on the screen as well. So I spent time in South Africa and at UCT. And in that time, towards, PhDs take a while to complete. And mine was dragging on a bit, and John had retired, and I needed to finish the thesis. And so John invited me to come to Volmoed, which is, you'll hear more about, a community outside of the town of Hermanus, west of or east of Cape Town. And I was able to finish a good portion of the thesis there and promptly fell in love with the area and certainly with the Volmoed community, and the people that I met there, and the ministry of healing and reconciliation in which
Mm.
Volmoed was involved. So I spent time then, and to make a long story short, about 2 years, a little more than 2 years ago, I retired, and I did some traveling and landed in Volmoed for a month, and realized that there was still a strong connection,
Mm.
and in a time of great transition had something to offer as well. So I've become active again and spending about 6 months of the year in South Africa. So um,
Wonderful. Well, Bob, thank you so much. We'll hear more shortly from you, and it's you have been the glue that's bound us all together. So thank you for this. Teresa, just want to briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll go to John. Tell us who you are, what your connection is.
Hi, everybody. My name is Theresa Edlmann. I am currently involved in managing and leading the Volmoed Trust, having arrived there soon after I finished my studies in 1989. and visited the place numerous times since then. And a lot of that was because of the role of Volmoed and other Christian leaders such as Desmond Tutu, who was the patron of Volmoed for many years. And the link between Volmoed and both the struggle against apartheid, but also the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, which I was very involved in. I'll leave it at that for now.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's given us a taste. John, over to you to introduce yourself and to say a little bit more about the origin story. And Theresa's going to scroll through some slides as you speak. So, John, it's a pleasure to have you here. A real honor. Tell us a bit about you and about Volmoed.
Thank you very much. The slides that you're seeing are obviously of Volmoed. What you're seeing at the moment is the Volmoed Chapel. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Volmoed Community, as we now know it, began in 1986 during the states of emergency, and that was a very difficult time in the struggle against apartheid. And the community came out of a vision that two people had of providing space for people who were affected by apartheid and engaged in the struggle. And at that time, Volmoed seemed to be quite remote from anywhere else. No longer so, because the valley in which we live has become a major wine-producing region, and we have tourists driving past our gates every day, and it's a beautiful spot. As you can see, this is the garden outside the chapel. So I first came to Volmoed in 1986, shortly after it started, just to have a look around. I was told to come and see by my son, and who had come here as a youth volunteer. And I brought with me a distinguished professor from Chicago who was visiting us in Cape Town, Martin Marty, a church historian. And afterwards, Marty wrote an article about Volmoed, and he said the day will come at some time when Volmoed would be mentioned alongside of Holden Village and Iona Community. So that was 40 years ago, and that prophecy seems to be coming true. So Volmoed it means full of courage and hope. That's the Afrikaans word, what it means. And it was given to this place by Moravian missionaries from Germany, who in 1818, early in the 19th century, came here to work amongst lepers who were on this piece of land, which at that stage was just a bush with a river running through it. And the Moravian missionaries were invited to come and look after the lepers. So they called the place Volmoed, and they called the valley Himmel en Aarde, which means heaven and earth. And this is the whatever you call it, hanging behind the table in the chapel. It was done by my wife prior to us coming to live here, and it's scenes at Volmoed relating to biblical images and to the theme of reconciliation and justice and peace. I often use it to explain what Volmoed is all about, which I won't do right now. So we can trace the history of this place way back to hunter-gatherers and a chieftain called Atta, and that's in the 14th century. And in a sense, we sort of have a kind of history that's not unlike Iona. It stretches way back. And we keep on reminding ourselves that we are late comers to Volmoed. There were the hunter-gatherers before us, Atta's clan, there were the lepers, the Moravian missionaries, and then we arrived sort of lately in 1986. And it's an amazing story. The river running through, the Onrus River, as a waterfall, which you'll see in one of the pictures in a moment, but that gives you some idea of the buildings, the residences. These are all guest houses, and the river in front here. We're right underneath a mountain. It's a huge property. This is all part of our property, not the far mountain, but certainly the valley going up there. This is the river coming through Volmoed. People often come here on retreat to actually walk on Volmoed and to walk and to visit the waterfall and to climb the mountain. It's all part of the Volmoed experience, if you like. So it's been quite an exciting period. Here's the waterfall. It's changed over the years that we've lived here. This is how it looked when we first arrived here. My wife and I 25 years ago. But we've had floods, we've had all sorts of things happen. So the river keeps on changing, as does the waterfall. When we talk about the Volmoed community, it's a little bit like Iona, I guess. There are resident members of the community, like my wife and I, and a few others. But the Volmoed community stretches virtually over the globe. We have people who identify with Volmoed from many different places, and every week almost we have visitors from around South Africa and Europe and America and Latin America as well. So to talk about the Volmoed community as an intentional community, it's not just the people living here who have over the years met every day for prayer in the chapel and once a week to share in a communion or a Eucharistic service, which of course we still do. But it's a global community. But the place is what attracts people here. And people speak of it as a place where they have experienced God in a new way at a turning point in their lives. And that's more or less sums up what we're about. That's another part of the property. We go up to that ridge there, and you can see just a little building there. Until recently, that's where the Benedictine monks have been living. There have been Anglican Benedictines here for the last 6 years as part of our community. They have just bought a property about 5 hours away from us and started to build a monastery because they were growing too big for Volmoed. So that's been part of our story in recent times. With 5 hours of prayer every day in the chapel, which we can't possibly manage now, but which we are seeking to maintain in other ways. There are 5 programs at Volmoed. One is the retreat program, and Volmoed is primarily a retreat center. We have an art program. We have a youth program, which is very vibrant and a very exciting program, mainly involving young people from the nearby township in a program that's been going for the last, I think it's 8 years, almost 10 years. We have a legacy program, which is relating to theological students and the Faculty of Theology at Stellenbosch University. We have a colloquium every year. Last year, Rowan Williams was our guest at the colloquium. So we have these various programs that make up the life of Volmoed, and each one of them is becoming kind of self-sustaining and picking up on themes relating to the life of Volmoed and our ministry. So I think that's all I'm going to say. But I'd ask Theresa just to show a few more pictures and I can comment on them.
Do you want to show some more, Theresa? Or do you think?
We have gone through most of them. So
okay.
I don't know if for time it might be better
John,
just to...
Yeah, if we maybe move on and we can maybe come back because you've given us a
Okay.
beautifully succinct and powerful introduction to Volmoed and to your own story. You came there in '86, introduced by your son who was on a youth program, and you've helped us understand and to see the place. But what I'm really drawn by is this threefold rhythm that you talked about, the rootedness in time and place. There was a very particular situation and a very particular place where there was a rhythm of prayer. Into that, you welcomed and were welcomed yourselves. You welcomed people into the rhythms of prayer that were already there and that have, and rhythms of living on the land that have gone back millennia. And then thirdly, you are a dispersed community as well as an intentional community. The intentionality is in your dispersal as well as in your living together. And I think those three threads resonate very much with certainly us in the Iona community and more widely with the other communities with which we have been meeting these last days. I wonder if we can move a little bit to the second question. And for those of you who have been to these, you'll know where I'm going. What binds us together really as, I'm going to say, cousin communities or companion communities, more than our founding story, is also our commitment to the gospel of Christ, to the radical call in the Gospels to work for justice, peace, reconciliation, and wholeness, and to live out this call as intentional Christian communities. So this is the question that we've been exploring. What is it about intentional Christian communities that is vital today? Why does the world need the Iona community? Why does the world need the Volmoed community? What is ours now to do? What are we called now? How are we called now to be? And I'm going to, John, can you just pick up some of the threads and go with this next question? And then I'm going to bring you in, Bob, and ask you to add to what John's already shared. What is ours to do as intentional Christian communities today?
Yes, thank you. Let me just say, because I think it's partly an answer to your question, my interest in Christian communities, intentional ones, began at Theresa community in France, which I visited early on when I had been studying graduate studies in America and visited Theresa, which I had no clue about until I got there. And we have a very good relationship with Theresa. In fact, every year we have 2 or 3 of our young people going there as interns. And so that adds to the life of Volmoed. But I mention that because the rhythm of Theresa is exactly what you've been describing. And it's a kind of a monastic model for us that has left a deep imprint on the life of Volmoed. And it's continuing. So my own field of interest has been in the legacy of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and his words about the future of the church has to do with prayer and working for justice. And I think that is more or less where we are, how we combine a ministry of contemplative worship and prayer with an active ministry of working for justice and peace and reconciliation in the world. And those two poles, if you like, which are so often separated, I think intentional communities today are places where these two things are put together, because in many places, as you will know, the local parish church and the local congregation are having real difficulty in maintaining their life and providing that kind of ministry. We don't want to replace that, but we want to provide a model to enable congregations, parishes, and other groups to discover how to embody prayer and working for justice together. And a lot of people who come to Volmoed say this is what they've discovered here. Our commitment to both of those. Sometimes we've been a bit slow and slothful on prayer, and sometimes we've forgotten why we exist in terms of justice, but that's what our vision is all about. And I think that one reason why we are committed to having a relationship with other intentional communities like Iona is because we see a shared vision, commonality around those two poles of Christian existence.
Beautiful. And I think, that calling to be alongside church, ecclesiality, the ecclesial manifestation of the church, is one that we share with you, that we are here as part of the renewal of that which we call church, rather than something that's a replacement of. And so many of our members find that by joining with a community like ours, they're strengthened to remain within the institutions of the church and find a way to bring that relationship between work and worship, between prayer and politics, or prayer and working for justice, into the heart of our lives. Bob, do you want to pick up from where John has taken us and answer that question or add to it about the purpose of intentional communities today?
Thanks so much. I think it's important to emphasize what John was saying about the context in which Volmoed came into being as a community as it is now in the 1980s, in the time of states of emergency in South Africa, and the challenge to the churches at that time to be the church. If you remember, it was the time of the Kairos document in South Africa, of the Belhar Confession, of the need for the churches to take leadership in the struggle against apartheid when other organizations had been silenced. Volmoed was all a part of that. It was a place for people to come and to be renewed, and a place to seek healing, in a time that was just such a violent and difficult time in South Africa and also in the world. And I think what we're discerning in this time is that we're in another moment of crisis, certainly globally, and also within South Africa itself, and asking questions about the role of the church and who we should be. What does it mean to be the church in the kind of world in which we're living today? And I see, kind of coming out of my own context in Canada in particular, the end of the Christendom model of church, at least as we've known Christendom, in this context, and that it has failed miserably in many ways in the world. And there are many people who have asked questions about even the existence of the church. But I think it's forced many of us to say, what does it mean to be intentional? What does it mean to choose to follow Jesus? What does it mean to choose to follow the gospel in the kind of world we're living in? We're inspired often by John and his knowledge of Dietrich Bonhoeffer and the parallels between the church in Germany in the 1930s and the church in South Africa in the 1980s, and the choices people had to make to be the church, to live lives that sought justice in contexts that were so divisive and unjust and violent. And I think we're having to make those choices today. I think Volmoed is one possibility of that. And Theresa and I have often joked about the fact that in this moment, it seems she and I and several other people have just kind of appeared and been present in Volmoed and have been trying to, in our own way, be part of the discernment that the community makes for this time and place. I think I see in Volmoed elements of other communities that I've been a part of. I've been associated with Iona over the years. I've been associated with a camp and retreat center in Canada called Camp Kintail, which, as I've talked to young people who were involved in that community now, that's what they call church. That's the only thing that is church for them, is a community of faith, a community of love for them. And I think these communities like Volmoed can be models for what it is to be the local church as well. I was minister in a congregation in Toronto, downtown Toronto, and I was thinking about this today as I was reflecting on intentional community. It was a big old church in the downtown core that almost closed because there were not very many people around. But it was the kind of place that became a place that people chose to be church rather than it just being a given, which many of us had assumed for a long time. And it was the kind of place where we had a larger number of adult baptisms than infant baptisms because people were coming as adults and choosing this as a place to be a follower of Jesus, to be present with people in the community who needed our presence and we needed them as well to be the church in that place. And I think Volmoed can fulfill that. There are many challenges still in post-apartheid South Africa that what does it mean to be community with a broad section of the population that still live separated lives in so many ways. That's still a huge challenge in South Africa.
And that those separated lives are being separated almost violently daily when, I mean, here we are gathered across the globe in a beautiful way, and yet we know that the rise of and the extensive use of technology is separating people from community, from neighborhood, from family, and war and the climate catastrophe and the refugee crisis and the crisis of identities are fragmenting society. And I think any opportunity, any place where we can come together with a deep intentionality about the value of encounter, for me, this is incarnational. This is what it means to be followers of Christ, where we put a high premium on an encounter where we're open to question, we're open to voices other than our own. And open means being willing to listen in order to change, not just to pay lip service to the other, but to listen in order to change. And it's that depth of encounter that I think the world around us, the world around me here in Penrith needs. And we're not the only ones offering those opportunities. And at its best, community networks, neighborhood networks, churches, social justice projects, and Christian communities can offer that space.
Well, I could come back in there, Ruth.
Yeah.
I think one of the great gifts to Volmoed in the last 10 years has been our youth program. That's mainly young people from the townships who come to Volmoed every week. To begin with, they lived at Volmoed for 3 months. And we had the first few years until COVID, a small community of 20 young people living with us from very, very disadvantaged backgrounds. Now the program runs throughout the week, but not on Volmoed. We have a drum making factory in the township. We have a drum school, and they perform all over the place. And they are here on a Thursday to be part of our Eucharistic worship with their drums and their singing and dancing sometimes. And that's been an enormous gift to Volmoed. So in a sense, we haven't had to go looking for where we can be of some use in the world. The world has come to us. And it's amazing that young people who have been through school and can't find work have shown us what hope is all about and have contributed to our life in a way that reminds us that sometimes the church doesn't have to serve the world. It has to be open to allow the world to actually impact upon its own life.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much, John. Yeah. I'm going to move us along a little bit because we want to get to this nugget of the question about Advent, taking all that we have heard so far about the charism of Volmoed and what you bring to the world and what those young people in particular bring. Here we are towards the end of the season of Advent, and I'm going to come to you, Theresa, for this conversation. This is the season of waiting, the anticipation of the birth of the Prince of Peace. What does this season of Advent offer or mean to you and to the Volmoed community? What are we waiting for? What are you waiting for as a community? Does this season hold a particular meaning, resonance for you as an intentional Christian community? Theresa, can you help us understand Advent through the lens of Volmoed?
Before that, I'm going to cheat a little bit and answer the previous question and then lead into the Advent question, because I'd like to add another layer to what John and Bob have said and allude to the enormous influence of Desmond Tutu, not only on the South African church, but on Volmoed as well, particularly because of his messages about love and radical inclusivity. That what he was a role model of in such powerful ways is that even the most feared oppressor, the most marginalized child, is loved by God and is therefore called to be loved by us too. That which dwells in the deepest realms of shadow within the church, within each of our lives, within our communities, needs to be loved into healing and embraced rather than excluded. And my sense of what this Advent particularly is about is kind of twofold, because 1986, next year is 2026, Volmoed celebrates its 40th anniversary. So it's interesting how many, Corrie I think is turning 60, Iona is turning 90, but 40 is a very interesting biblical number. And it's often about a time, a particular kind of time that then comes to a close in order to enable something else to happen, whether it's fasting in the wilderness or living in exile or whatever. The 39th year or day, the 40th year or day, and then the 41st are each very different. And so Volmoed is sitting at the end of its 39th year. On a threshold. And Advent, for me, is all about preparing for the threshold. But in the Christian tradition, it is a threshold that is characterized by vulnerability, the vulnerability of a small child, the sacred child being born in a marginalized place, and that the mother of that fragile child is young, and yet has wisdom beyond what we still can comprehend to this day. And so what does it mean, I think, not only for Volmoed, but in the world, to be on the cusp of things we do not know and cannot see, but that as Christians who are committed to social justice, which for me means radical inclusivity, that means embracing the fragility and the vulnerability and the pain and the hope and the courage, and trusting that there will be alchemy to come. Trusting that that little moment of birthing in somewhere where nobody else wanted to welcome that child then changed history. And there are possibilities beyond what we can understand. And for me, that also fits within systems theory in the sense that all of our systems are breaking in different ways. The church system, our political systems, our economic systems, our family systems to some extent. But when in systems theory, when there is an element of a system that functions coherently, it will influence what the system becomes. And for me, a place like Volmoed or Corrie or Iona, and I've forgotten the name of the place in Devon. That
it was Wellspring and Othona, yeah.
And Wellspring as well, Othona. We are all tiny little places that replicate what's happened throughout history. Is that by being places of prayer, by being places of learning and reflection, places that seek wisdom, Sophia, we play a small role in what is to come in ways that bring possibilities that are loving and hopeful and healing and just, that wouldn't be possible if in our little corners of the world we hadn't done our part.
What a beautiful reflection, and a hopeful reflection, Theresa. It reminds me of the notion of the fractal, that
Yes,
we are
yes,
we are whole within ourselves, and
yeah,
if we can nurture and hold ourselves, and honor who we are, and offer that as gift into the world, and receive community as gift from others, then we
yes,
can offer hope. And there are other places like the Abbey, as Claire has mentioned,
yes,
other
absolutely.
other
Yeah,
other
yeah,
other
yeah.
fractals, other small elements of functioning systems. I love the way you bring in systems theory after a deep theological reflection. Thank you so much for that. And I wonder if you can just say a little bit, and friends on the screen, in about 5 minutes or so, we're going to open up the conversation and invite anyone who'd like to join in to come and maybe offer a reflection or ask a question, join in the conversation. But before we do that, Theresa, do you want to just say a little bit more about the 40th birthday celebrations, how you're going to mark that, and how we might be able to be involved from across the world?
Yes, with pleasure. Thank you for the question. So we started in November with a prayer vigil. We're going to have 4 10-hour prayer vigils, each of them focusing on the contributions of people who were involved in each of the 4 decades of Volmoed, but also praying for the future decades of Volmoed. That began beginning of November. We then had a reflective retreat where those who were present were reflecting on previous experiences of community. How have those shaped us? How have those shaped what Volmoed became? And we then had a wonderful workshop looking at different models and ideas and possibilities of community. And those will form the key themes and the foundation for a further conference in the first week of July, which everybody is most welcome to come to. We will be sending out a call for proposals and ideas about what people would like to bring to a conversation about the role and the purpose and the possibilities of intentional community in our time, both for Volmoed, but more broadly. You know, we are, as you say, a tiny fractal. During Lent, we have 40 weeks of meditations on different saints, historical saints, modern day saints, but all with that focus of spirituality and justice, and drawing from the wisdom of those who've gone before us. In April, we have what we're calling a Founders and Friends Day, where we will acknowledge the many people who've contributed to what Volmoed is now. And we're hoping that by the end of the year, we'll be able to publish a book. And then there'll be sorry, I'm skipping a few. June next year is the 10th anniversary of our youth program. And in South Africa, we celebrate Youth Day because that's the anniversary of the Soweto riots in South Africa, where school children were killed by the apartheid forces. And so we'll have a 10th anniversary celebration of our youth program. In November, we have a colloquium with Stellenbosch University with an annual lecture, a de Gruchy legacy lecture in memory of not only John, but his son Steve, who was also a very eminent theologian. And so it's different events, but ultimately wanting to draw together at the end of the year an understanding of, in a sense, what our key focus areas will be. Something that I haven't mentioned yet, but is increasingly part of our conversations. And so if anyone else is able to bring us experience and wisdom around ecological and environmental issues and spirituality and reconciliation, because we are at the moment planning to declare up to 80% of the land that we own, if ownership is a thing, to declare it a nature reserve in perpetuity, to protect it from future farming and building practices, and to enable the fynbos that we are so renowned for in this part of the world to flourish. And the animals, I mean, we have leopards in the mountains here that are endangered. And so that's also a theme that we want to explore and would love to engage in conversations with others who might have traveled that road too.
What a wonderful invitation. And I'm thinking, I know Lisa Riley is on the call, and Lisa is one of our great eco icons who teaches us so much about ecology. There may be a conversation there between Wellspring and Volmoed in that regard. John.
And I just pick up on one thing there, which Theresa has prompted. We have something called the Legacy Fellows Program here. Bob was one of our Legacy Fellows. And there are 4 or 5 areas that we are looking at. One is the role of art, the other is environment, another is theology and justice. Well, there are 5 areas. And we invite people to apply to come and spend a month or 2 at Volmoed as a Legacy Fellow to work on a project on one of those themes, both to enhance the life of Volmoed, but also the wider church and their own lives. So if there are people out there listening in, this is something that we are encouraging. We hope next year that we'll have 1 or 2 fellows at least during the course of the year.
What a wonderful vision and I think I'm particularly drawn to the way that you integrate, and you've mentioned youth and the youth program in a number of different ways throughout all of these questions, and I really take heart from that and you've mentioned Tese also, that the place where young people can feel at home and can articulate their questions and feel welcomed beyond measure.
Yeah.
If we can do that, then we're doing something good.
Yeah.
I'm going to pause for now and just ask if anyone would like to join us. Now, you're going to have to just unmute yourself and say, yes, please, Ruth, or put your electronic hand up and I will see you. So please do come and join us on the screen with any reflections. I have a heap of thoughts I want to come back to. So and do keep thinking about that if you would like to come and join us. But John, you at the beginning, and I know you might have to leave before the end, but I wanted just to grab you before you do. There was a picture of the hanging that your wife had made of Volmoed, and you said this would tell us the story of Volmoed, but I'm going to skip over that. I wonder if you might just in your head, we can have the picture back up again, but I want to ask you to say a little bit more about that, and then we'll bring Andrew up onto the screen. But John, do you remember saying that about yeah.
Can you get the picture back up, Theresa?
Yep, right now.
Thank you. There it is.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so 4 scenes from Volmoed. Woven into those themes are biblical allusions and other stuff. So let me start on the left-hand side with the tree for the healing of the nations and the river running through. So Volmoed is a place of healing, and the arum lily, of course, is a very good symbol of that. But one of the things that you'll notice is that each of the panels has a biblical allusion. So the importance of actually biblical reflection in our life is quite fundamental to us going forward. So the second panel, you'll see there the Volmoed cross. Like so many things that happen at Volmoed, we didn't design it. Somebody designed it and gave it as a gift. And then we said, oh, that's the Volmoed cross. This was right at the beginning. And that happens time and again where we are taken by surprise. So that's become the Volmoed cross. And it's symbolizing both brokenness, but also coming together and being healed. So the backdrop to that are the stripes of healing for the nations. Those, of course, are vineyards on the hills around Volmoed. And the path of life that leads us to the cross through the fynbos, the protea fynbos, for which this place is famous. And then the third panel, of course, is the fact that higher up our valley there are wheatlands. Once the vineyards cease, we get the wheat farms, the bread of life, and the vineyards, of course, and the cup of salvation, the wine, the bread and the cup, incense, prayer rising as incense in the valley, the dove of peace. Our bird life is phenomenal here. If anybody's interested in birds, this is the place to come. And the sun rising over the mountains, bringing light to the world. And then the final image, the deer panting at the water brooks, searching for God, being taken over by God's presence here. The waterfall as the running water of life, continually refreshing the pond at the bottom. So the water is on the move, and it's life-giving. And then, of course, we are raised up as on eagle's wings. So all of these are biblical and environmental allusions that tell the story of Volmoed.
Thank you. And thank you. What's your wife's name, John?
Isabel.
Isabel, thank you to Isabel for this beautiful ministry. And if you can offer Volmoed as a sanctuary and a light under the banner of these 4 panels, then my goodness, that's a beautiful offering. Thank you so much. I want to bring Andrew to join us now. Andrew, I don't know if you were, I've just lost you.
I'm here.
I just wonder, can you spotlight yourself, or can you? Let me see if I can find you again. You took your hand down, I think. And so I've lost.
I'll have to get rid of the chat to do that.
Here you are. No, somebody else has done it.
Yep.
Fantastic.
All right. Okay.
Andrew,
thank you.
before we begin, I want you to just know that Andrea Rogers is on the line, and she was saying how much the daily prayers online mean.
I heard.
And friends, here is Andrew, who produces these in the middle of a very busy life, along with a small team. But you are the genius behind this, Andrew. So thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I wasn't the genius behind it. I can't claim credit for that, but it's been a labour of love to run it for the last 5.5 years.
5.5 years. Andrew, you're welcome to join us. What would you like to offer to
Well, thank you. I'm very touched by some of the conversations you had there about peace and reconciliation and the process that many people in South Africa went through when apartheid came to an end. And Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Desmond Tutu mentioned Palestine many times, I think, in conjunction with the connections between South Africa and Palestine and the commonality of some of the struggle. I'm looking for signs of hope at the time when there is just so little sign of hope. And I wonder if you can say something about your experience of that peace and reconciliation process, which might give some glimmers of hope, because I'm really struggling to find that there will ever be reconciliation in the Holy Land. But I desperately pray and hope there will be, but the signs are so feeble at the moment.
We've had strong links between Volmoed and Palestinian Christians over the years, and quite a few have visited Volmoed, and quite a few people connected to our community have spent time there, including some artists from Volmoed. Of course, things have changed so dramatically and terribly over the last few years, so those kind of connections have been broken in terms of physical connection and not in terms of contact. We still keep contact, and we are linked together through the Kairos Palestine movement and the South African Kairos. So there are those connections. I wish I could say something about that would give you enormous hope, other than the fact that Christmas was a time when the Herod soldiers slaughtered the innocents. And we must not forget that that was the framework within which new life came into the world. What that might mean, I don't know, but certainly Christmas doesn't take us away from that harsh reality. In fact, we are always amazed at the people not only in Gaza, but in Palestine as a whole, and not least in Bethlehem at this moment, the resilience and the courage. It's a gift to the world. It's a gift to the church. Palestinian was one of our first young people on our program in 2015, 2016. So we've had a strong connection, but I can't say anything more than you already know and sense. how this is going to play out.
Mm.
Except to say that nobody at their first Christmas knew how that was going to play out either.
Thank you, John. Bob, do you want to join in?
Yes, could I just say too, I'm old enough, and I think many people on this call are old enough to remember that before 1994, there were many people who said there was no hope for South Africa. There was no way that there could be change or peace or reconciliation in the South African context. And although there's, much more to do, the change did come, and there were possibilities. And I think, as we've been saying on this call, it was the witness of people like Desmond Tutu and many other Christians in South Africa to a vision and a possibility of transformation and a vision of hope in what seemed like a hopeless situation that carried South Africa through to a different time. And that doesn't take away anything of the terrible pain and suffering of people in South Africa or in the Israel-Palestine situation. But it is important to hold up a vision of hope and of transformation, even in the darkest times.
Thank you.
Theresa, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'd love to just add to what John and Bob have said, because 1986-87 were arguably the most violent and brutal years of the apartheid regime. And we've had that passage from Jeremiah in our chapel services recently about buying a field against all logic and all sense, because there was no hope. And my memory of that time, and I think it's as true now, is that part of holding on to hope is being ready for when the change comes. We don't know when or where, but when change comes, there need to be people who have enough leadership capacity and wisdom to step into those gaps. That's partly why the change in South Africa was so significant, because of the decades of work by church leaders and by political leaders. And they were ready to go as the cracks appeared and the system started crumbling. And I do not have any more than my intuition to offer. But my very strong sense is that there will be cracks. Nothing can last that is as self-destructive as what is happening in Palestine at the moment and what the Israeli state is doing. It will crack, and we need to be ready, and we need to be holding all of that in prayer.
It's the being ready and the who is there that will lead that advance into the gaps when they appear, and that's where I'm afraid I do despair, because at the moment it just seems to be such an endless cycle of death and destruction. But I'm looking for signs of hope. Any straws will be clutched at the moment, I think.
And I guess just bringing back full circle, what is ours now to do? We on this call have a sense of vocation within religious community of some kind or other. What is it within that gives us the strength? We talk about the warp and the weft of our rule of life, rooting us in time and space with our local community members with whom we are accountable to maintain that discipline of prayer and reflection, bound with the weft or the global networks of what we call our common concern networks. And it's these strengthening threads of warp and weft that connect us. And I do believe that small as we are, this is ours. We are here and called to these religious communities. And somewhere in the midst, there must be threads of this readiness for change that are emerging. And maybe it is in the disciplines of our rule of life and our common concerns. It's in the disciplines and the networking globally that we find that strength. I wonder, Mike, you have your hand up, and I'm going to, Andrew, thank you so much for your question. You're welcome to stay. I'm going to bring Mike onto the screen, and then I think this will be our closing reflection. Andrew, do you want to stay, or do you want to go back to your seat as if we were in a room?
I'll listen in. I don't
Hang
need to be
on,
on the screen though.
Mike, the floor is yours, Mike.
It's lovely to be with John, Theresa, and Bob again, because
Hello, Mike.
I was there last in heavens, when was it? Late October.
Or was it?
One of the things that wasn't mentioned is the fabulous hospitality and spectacularly good food. It was, but so that's so important. It's we have that gift on Iona as well, but it creates an atmosphere of encounter and an atmosphere of hospitality and being grounded in the goodness of creation. So that was one thing I wanted to say. But the other is this business about hope and Palestine, if I might, because I went from Volmoed on to Palestine for about 4 weeks, ending at the Kairos conference when the second Kairos document was issued. And I probably need to read it again and again and again. But I would say that what it is saying is people look to Palestine and ask, where is their hope? But they are looking to the world and saying, when will you act out of hope in order that you change our reality? And so, so hope is about taking action because it's right. The international community, to use the word loosely, and in coming back to Bonhoeffer and the churches at the time of the Second World War, and the churches before we had the Kairos theology for South Africa, and the churches before we had the Kairos theology from Palestine, which is still not broadly acknowledged. These theologies were part of the problem, and the churches need to become part of the solution. So I guess the question I would ask my friends here is, what impact can international action have? And how do we make that something which is done in hope that changes the reality for Palestinians in the same way that boycott, divestment, and sanctions, as I understand it, changed the reality for South Africa?
Thank you, Mike. That's a huge question. What impact can our churches, what can our actions have for hope in Palestine? I wonder. We're gonna draw this to a close with a short prayer or blessing, which I believe, Theresa, you're going to offer us. In advance of that, Bob, Theresa, John, do you want to offer any reflection to Mike's very large question?
It won't be as large an answer, but what came to mind as you were speaking, Mike, and as we reflect in the Advent season, is that so often we hear in Scripture, in the readings in Advent, do not be afraid. And I think that the church has been afraid. It was afraid at the time of of the struggle in South Africa. My church refused to, divest. It didn't want to make bold statements, and I think we have to lose that fear as churches, and also as communities. And sometimes that means we remain on the margins, but that seems to be where God works most often. But to lose the fear to call our churches and our governments to speak for justice, and we can't deny anymore what's happening in Palestine. So losing our fear.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Yeah. John, and then I'm going
Just to
hand.
go back to the question that we were talking about earlier on the role of intentional communities at this point in time. And if you look back in church history, they generally fulfilled a particularly important role in dark age situations when not much else has been happening in the life of the church to keep issues alive. Now, I don't want to put too much of an emphasis on intentional communities being able to do all that, but at least they can be communities in which these issues are kept alive and where people can be nurtured in understanding them.
Mm. And so there we have a small part to play, but maybe it's these, back to your systems theory here, Theresa, that even these small manifestations of functional systems, if they're ready and able and unafraid, can bring about the change when that opportunity arises. Thank you so much, Mike, for your question. I'm going to unspotlight you and with my thanks. And I'm going to invite you, Theresa, to draw this session to a close with a prayer or a blessing from Volmoed.
So this prayer was written by Barry Wood, who was one of the founding trustees of Volmoed and its first chaplain. So maybe we can pray this together. Almighty God, you have established the glory of your presence over Volmoed. Bless all who seek you with the wisdom of your truth. Heal those who are sick and strengthen them in their recovery. Reconcile those whose lives and relationships are broken. And fill us with your love, joy, and peace. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. My friends, thank you so much for joining us here. It's been a true pleasure to meet you over these last 3 or 4 months, and now to be in community with you on the screen. Blessings on all of you three here and all in the Volmoed community as these last few days of Advent take us to Christmas and then into the new year. And friends, more widely, my blessings and love to all of you as we turn the corner from 2025 into 2026. May we continue to find strength, hope, love, joy, and peace together in community, wherever we are, gathered and scattered across the globe. Farewell and thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth, and to all in the Iona community.
Well, it has been a real joy, and I want to say a special thank you also to Fiona, who has been the technical wizard behind the scenes for all of these sessions. Yeah, but for now, farewell and thank you.